people get hurt just to leave the training. And then that gives them the excuse to tell all their friends, well, I broke something. Everybody breaks something, all right? It's whether you're going to continue or not that determines the outcome of your life. So what? You're broken. Get over it.
Welcome to Mindset Lessons from the Field. I'm Gina Cazazzo, the author of the upcoming memoir, Training with a SEAL. And today's podcast guest grew up in a Special Forces family. He went into the Joint Special Operations Command and then went into Joint Special Operations Task Force, Afghanistan. Today, he is a 13-time best-selling author, the owner of leader-kit.com, and an incredible keynote speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, I introduce you to Atlas Aultman. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Hey, Gina, thank you so much for having me. I've listened to a lot of your shows. There's a lot of goodness that's coming out of them, and you're just pulling the right questions at the right time. You always do the best research too. I love the questions you're asking. That's what I would ask. That is a great question. So thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you for being here. I'm excited to talk to you because you are the first guest on the show that grew up in a Special Forces family. And I find that interesting because a lot of our guests, when they talk about it, they're gone for most of the year, and they're not as present in the family life. And I wanted to know what it was like for you growing up in a Special Forces family, and if there were lessons that you learned throughout that translated to assisting you throughout your career.
Yeah. All right. The most vivid memory I ever had as a child, I was at my grandfather's house, and he was in Special Operations, MAC-VSOG. So that's Material Assistance Command in Vietnam. And they tried a lot of different things in that Special Operations group from the Green Beret perspective. So he was gone a lot. He did 4 pulls over in Vietnam. So we saw him in between wars, and he would get like a couple weeks. It seemed like it was just blowing by whenever I'd get some time with him. But this vivid memory was crazy because we had just moved in with him. My mom hadn't met my adopted dad yet, and he was the only man in my life. And I was running around the shed, and this giant beehive was just hanging out, and I had no idea what it was. So like any inquisitive kid, I threw rocks at it. And these bees came out, and they were the size of my thumb, and I have some big hands, man. They were huge. I remember seeing them and thinking, wow, look at that bird. And it just went flying around me. And all of a sudden I had this attention that I didn't want, right? One of the bees went right up my shorts and got me in the you don't want to know where area. And I remember screaming like I've never screamed before and thinking, where the heck is my grandpa? He would know how to fix this. And he wasn't there. So just that lesson right there, the resiliency, it started when I was like 4, right? When I was 4, I had this experience, and I remember it. I mean, I'm sweating right now just thinking about it. I remember feeling that, and then looking for the man in my life to like help me figure out what I could do with my man parts. It wasn't there. And that lesson was like, hey, no one's going to come and save you. Like even at a young kid, I was like, I have to figure this out. And that's what started the whole journey of like mental toughness. Resilience is what people will call it. But like I started very young, and then it continued. And why did I look for my grandpa? Well, he was the one that saved me after I drowned. I died when I was like 4, like 3-4 months before that, before he pushed out. And I was in a pool in the neighbor's house, and I thought I could swim. I was not a Navy SEAL, and I died, and he brought me back. And I remember that whole experience, like he can save me. He can do anything, because everyone comes to this man wearing a beret and a Special Forces patch. I was like, this guy can do it all. But when he wasn't there, who does it all? And so that was interesting. That was my 3, 4, 5 years experience there as a 3, 4, 5-year-old with my grandpa. And yeah, that's kind of what it taught me young. And then my mom met my dad, and he was in the Special Forces community as well. And then we just kind of traveled around, and he eventually got out of the Special Forces community and went into regular Army, and about deployed because he was looking for an opportunity to be a part of something bigger than himself. So Panama was going crazy at the time. So I remember that too, because I was on a obstacle course competition and I had won it. And my dad was pushing out and I had the trophy. And my mom saw the convoy because everybody rolled out in convoys back then. They were going down to the Gulf to get on these massive like transports. And he was in the back and we sped up to the convoy. And I remember hanging out the side of the car that we had. It was a real small car and I rolled down the window. I cranked down the window, and I had this trophy that was bigger than my head, and I stuck it out the window. And I remember him like putting his rifle down and giving me two thumbs up. And man, it was cool to get approval from somebody like that. You know, the community was a strong community, and they don't just let anybody in. So getting my dad to do two thumbs up and let go of his rifle, that was a big win for me as a kid. So thanks for asking. Good question.
That's really awesome. You said something, well, you said a lot of great things, but the fact that you're 4 and you learn like nobody is coming to save me. I
Yeah,
have to learn how to save myself. I mean, that is a huge lesson to learn as a child. Huge
yeah.
lesson. And how did that impact you throughout those? Well, I can only speak for me, but for me, like those preteen, teenage years, those are tough moments in terms of discovering yourself and navigating life. And you're going through all these different changes and
Yeah,
the social circle. And for you, you said you moved around a lot.
I
So
did.
how was the growing up and not always having that present parent and moving around a lot and being a new kid? How was that for you?
Yeah, Gina, that's is interesting. Uh, as an adopted kid, I folded into someone else's family, so I've always been a bolt on to any environment that I've had from a young age. Since my grandpa was not in my life from the deployments, and then when we moved away and I was with my dad's family, I wasn't really around anyone but my mom. My mom was still there, loved her. She was a great, strong woman. She was my first life coach, and I talk about that. But she would tell me things as a military child herself that would help me. And a lot of these things can translate to real life. Like when you move to a new environment, what do you do? Well, today I guess you go to a dog park if you have a dog and you're going to meet other dog owners, right? That's the number one place to meet people. You're like, "Oh, cool dog. You have a dog. Sick." I'm a big so I love dogs and I love people who love dogs. So that's me. But back in the day, my mom was like, play sports. So at a very young age, she had me involved in baseball. She had me involved in basketball and soccer. And I was always playing sports and meeting kids. And that's how I would fold into the environment. So as a child, I played a lot of sports. We had parks. We didn't have the internet when I was growing up, so we'd go to parks, and I would play pickup games, and I'd meet kids, and then I'd go to school with them, and they'd be like, "Hey, you're the kid from the park," and I'm like, "Yeah," and that was an immediate gratification for someone who's coming in new. And I continue to do that. I mean, in the gym, I'm talking to people. Whenever I'm at the BJJ mats, I'm talking to people. I'm always talking to somebody in an athletic form because that's where people go to improve themselves. And those are the people I want in my life. So a big thing that I pulled away from one of your other episodes was Marty Strong when he talked about, coming in and then going through training and finding the positive people. Like that is so huge in life. And I always tried to find the positive people growing up in life as a kid very early so that I could be around the positive influences and the positive people instead of worrying about what was negative about my life or what was going to be bad, which most people seem to focus on in their life. So if you're always looking for positive people, you're going to find them because the brain's wired to look, and find what you're looking for. So reticular activating system, right?
How did you know that? How did you know were you a positive person? It doesn't seem like you, hold on. Oh, there we go. It doesn't seem like you fell into the victim mode, which I feel like a lot of people do. They fall into the I
Yeah.
feel sorry for myself victim mode. And I mean, at 4 to learn nobody's going to save you, translating that into life, and growing up and everything and having that lesson with you was being positive, something that you always, where did you learn that?
Yeah, definitely my mom, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of your guests talk about how their parents influenced them, and a lot of your guests talk about your parent or their father specifically influencing them to take a choice in a service, a branch of service. My dad was no exception. He was like, "Hey, you've been around the army all your life. You would do better in the Air Force." He's like, you can be with the Army, with the Navy, with the Marines. Marines didn't have special operations like they do today back then, but he's like, you can be with all these cool people and in the Air Force, and that's probably going to be a better cycle for you because at the time they weren't deploying as long as the Army. He's like, you're going to have a better family life. You're going to have a better life. And that was before I had a family. So my mom had that all sewn up. She was like, when I was a kid, I always looked for the positive people. Those are the cool people for a reason. Like whenever you're looking at popularity, the people who are positive, they're popular. When you're looking at your social media feeds today, the people that are positive are popular. They start off with a negative to grab you and then be like, hey, everybody sucks. And you're like, what? Everybody sucks? And they're like, yeah, but you don't have to. And then they talk about how you can be positive and how you can be an influence. And that's one of the things I'll tell your audience later. I'm sure we're going to go into it because your show always ends with something that can help somebody. That like this is a huge deal. Like who you put in your life is a big deal. And after 30 years of being in the military, and around elite teams, I found that and I put it on a TED stage, and it's amazing, amazing things to uncover. But yeah, I know we're gonna get into that, so I'll just shut up now.
Yeah. No, it's so true. It's so true. Being positive, I feel like, it's like it can't, like Marty said, it's like either way, negativity is like a cancer, but positivity, it's the same thing. Like, you grab on to the people that are positive, just like the negative people suck you down. And unless you have that energy field to be like, to recognize it,
Yeah.
and to not play a part of it, because it's so much easier to play a part of it. Now, did you find when you were going into your career? Well, let's talk about the career, and then I want to
Okay.
know, like, in your career, like
Yeah.
that mental toughness, that positivity, all that stuff that then I'm sure propelled you to where you went into your career.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the career and the route that you went. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I came in the military at 17
Mhm.
and I joined by enlisting, which means I didn't have to have a degree. I didn't have to get Senate approval or anything like that. So I went right into the Air Force and I started doing what my friends called a paper pusher job. They're like, hey, they did the old Simon Sinek. They're like, starting with why. They're like, hey, why don't you become a Navy SEAL? You're an athlete. And I was like, and they're like, go get a Green Beret or Ranger tab, be in special forces like your family. And I'm like, and my dad was like, yeah, you can do all that, but I know who you are, and you're going to be better suited using your intellectual side and then playing sports. And then you're going to get into that. Trust me. And he was right. He was 100% right. So I joined the Air Force, became a paper pusher. And then I started employing a decision model that my mom had actually put in my life. She was like, hey, you need to look at decision makers, like, you need to look at leaders. She's like, this is what you need to look at. And when she put me in these environments with these positive leaders, it didn't matter if they were a chump or a champ. They used five things, right? Who, what, where, when, and why. And then some of them were fancy and they used how too. So they had six things. But they would go through this decision cycle, and I used that to like choose what I was going to do for my life or my career. And I made my mom mad. I'll tell you about that. I mean, I made her angry, like visibly angry, or like veins popping out of her face, angry. But I went in the Air Force. And then I changed the way the Air Force promotion system works based off of some things that just didn't make any sense. And then I got put around the four-star general, the top guy in the military, right? And he was making decisions off of email, which was new because I'm old, right? It was new back then. And they were like making decisions and print them out for the general to look at. So I'd print out these emails, bring them into a binder. One of the decisions was, to put someone like me in to college and finish my degree because I was going to college at the time, and then become a full-time leader, or what we call an officer. So Senate approval, four-star approval, and then Christmas time he came down with this little card, gave it to me, and he waited for me to open it up. I was like, "This is cool. What is it?" And he's like, "Congratulations. I chose you to put on the bars of a second lieutenant. And that's really where my journey started, because my dad was right. But until that time, I thought I was just going to do some admin stuff and like be in an office and like, okay, that was cool. I'm going to go do something else. But bam, when that happened, I picked, technology, the ability to be around like the most elite people. Because at the time, and still, technology leaders, they are all over the place. Elon Musk's, Bill Gates was big at the time. You had all these people just blowing up with billions of dollars and influencing the world and being elite in a new way. And I was like, I want to be a part of that. And then my friends, again, they were like, what are you doing? Like, you're going to go be a geek? And I'm like, look at me, dude. Look at me. You think I'm a geek? And they're like, no, I just saw you in a bar fight the other day. I'm like, exactly. But I used to bounce in college. I used to bounce when I was enlisted. I got in a lot of fights. I like fighting. So I used to answer things with violence. And that all changed when I went and worked for the Obama administration. But anyways, where I decided to go into this whole Air Force thing and like jump that ship, I looked for opportunities where I could place myself around the most elite people and the best decision cycles. And then I wrote it all down, and I got a stack of notebooks. I should have pulled it out for the people that are watching it, but I got a stack of notebooks over 30 years, and I pared it all down. And just like you, like the experiences that you have, if you can share them with the world in a book, man, you're leaving a legacy. It's so huge whenever your book gets birthed to the world, and then you start getting reviews, and you're like, wow, I just changed people's lives. And I didn't mean to do that when I came in as a paper pusher, but eventually I'm doing combatives, I'm doing advanced shooting, I'm doing maneuvers, I'm doing convoy ops, I'm doing weird things like Israeli boxes, I'm doing tactical maneuvers, and then I'm in Iraq, I'm wearing vests, I'm going on special missions. It just happened so fast because I was looking for it to happen. And I was looking for the positive people. I wasn't looking for the people to tell me, like, Kyle Bucket, he said it the best. He goes, whenever you start telling somebody you're going to do something hard, they start becoming experts on how you can't do whatever it is, right? I love Kyle's on that. He's like, everyone's an expert. And it's so true. But like, whenever you figure it out, that the people around you are going to determine what you do and what you don't do based off of the things that they say to you and how it hits you. Like, I learned that early as a kid. I saw my parents, my dad, my grandpa all get influenced by the people that are around them, but they were freaking amazing people. They were amazing people. So I was always looking for the positive people, like my mom said, and those positive people fueled me. But I was still very careful on who I told what I was doing and when I was doing it, because that negative influence goes in your head, and then you're looking for it now, and you got to get away from that. And you can't tell anybody, that you're going to do something. So when I started doing these special missions, when I was in Iraq, no one knew I was over there until like the international news broke, and they were like, this Air Force guy got a Bronze Star. And then everyone's like, hey, congratulations. And I'm like, yeah, thanks, man. And they're like, we didn't even know you were over there. I'm like, I know. I know.
Today's podcast episode is brought to you by my absolute favorite company. If you know me or seen videos or photos of me, then you know I always have one on my wrist. I absolutely adore this company. DiscoverOmnia.com. DiscoverOmnia.com is the world's first smart crystal bracelet. Every single bracelet is handmade in the USA using real, genuine crystals made on memory wire. Every bracelet is unisex, and they're also aromatherapy. The cool part is the black onyx charm that is on the bracelet. It scans to your cell phone, connecting you to their Wellness Hub Elevate. You can also access their Wellness Hub Elevate on your computer or tablet. You just have to sign into your account. The bracelet gives you a 12-month membership. It has over 200 pieces of self-care content, from motivational tips, meditations, breathing exercises on the theme of your bracelet, printable journals, and so much more. The content is ever growing. And that's not all. The bracelet also gives you lifetime access to their Elevate Together Club, which meets monthly via Zoom. Each month is themed to give you actionable takeaways to elevate your life. And with this podcast 40% off your purchase order by using the code Mindset Podcast. Use that code Mindset Podcast for 40% off. Just go to discoveromnia.com. Discoveromnia.com, code Mindset Podcast for 40% off. Get your bracelet today. How old were you at that Christmas time when you got that card?
At 21. Yeah,
21.
Yeah.
Wow. So you were in for 4 years so far.
Yeah, I did 4 years, and then I'd made every rank early. So I changed the Air Force promotion system. They gave me a rank early, and then I studied. I got deployed out to Kuwait when Saddam was still out there lobbing. Yeah, that's here you just uncovered one. I've never told this story on any podcast. My first deployment, I was out with the first unit that Dave Goggins was a part of in the Air Force was called TAC-P. It's Tactical Air Control Party. And my first deployment, I got volunteered to go out with them and do like a weird one-off mission. And we were out there, and Saddam was lobbing scuds at us. And he did it quite often. And a lot of times they would miss, but he was always trying to attack us. No one in America knew. No one in America really knows what's going on overseas anyways, unless they're there. Unless somebody dies, no one cares. So at that time, we had just finished Operation Desert Storm, and we were making sure everything was staying safe in Kuwait. And so that's why we were present there. And he was making sure that we knew that he didn't like that. So we were coming back from outside the wire, and I was walking towards my tent, because I lived in a tent at the time, and I heard the sirens go off, and then I heard the Patriots try to intercept, and they didn't intercept. So I started hearing them getting closer, and I walked towards our bunker, and there's this Marine like just standing there, and he's like oblivious. I was like, dude, you got to get in a bunker, man. That might hit us. And he's like, oh no, I've heard that they don't. I'm like, yeah, this might hit us. And as soon as I went in to the bunker and I grabbed him and pulled him in, I looked down at the Coke that I got outside the wire, and I was like, man, this might be the last Coke I ever drink. This is ridiculously going to be tasty. And so I started drinking the Coke and making humor, because that's what that's what happens whenever your life is threatened. For a lot of people, they have different responses. A lot of people in my environment that have been through a lot of things, they start to get really funny whenever their life is threatened. So I started cracking jokes. Everyone was dying in there. I mean, I wish I had a microphone and a paycheck from that time, because I was funny. I had a Coke in my hand, and I was going to die going out happy. And one lobbed right outside. It hit pretty dang close. And the Marine looked at me. He goes, can I have some of that Coke? I said, no, man, it's my Coke. It was an interesting time, but definitely stacked up and helped me get promoted early. So when the general came down at 21, I had already experienced, like, it's not combat, but I'd already experienced near-death experiences. I had already changed the way, the biggest organization, the most powerful air power organization in the world does business. And I was around decision makers that were making, billion-dollar decisions every day. So I felt different than a normal 21-year-old, I bet. But at the time when I got the note, I felt like a little girl, man. I was ecstatic. And I started calling around looking for football teams I could get on. I was trying to walk on to a football team. Anyways, go ahead. I'll digress.
What I find really interesting is like it. Now you talk about this. You talk about not having a goal, but having a target. And
right.
What at 17, well, especially as a male, no offense, your brain isn't as, they say, mature as females.
True.
And
it's true.
Also going into it, like, one of the last podcast, Diego mentioned one of the episodes, he mentioned like my mind at 18 was really 13, which then, as he got older, he's like, I was still not technically my age. For you, it seems like you matured very quickly and you had I want to say the word target, and you're going to get into, I'm sure, like
Yeah,
why you should have targets instead of goals. And maybe this is where you'll answer that. But it maybe you learned that early on where
yeah,
you kind of had that drive. It didn't seem like a lot of people get affected by alcohol. You know, you're going into that age where now you're free, you're able to drink,
yeah,
you're, you know, out of parental, you know,
yeah.
guidance. And for you, it didn't seem like that really impacted you. Maybe I'm wrong.
No,
I don't know.
no, you're spot on. That's a good assessment. My parents, they kind of employed a militant rule set early on in my childhood. They said, you can make your own decisions. Like if you want to go do drugs, cool, just don't drive. Give us a call. And then I don't want to call my dad and tell him I did drugs. You know what I mean? So it's like a reverse weird, like a command situation where I'm not going to call my commander and tell him I did drugs. They're like, you want to go drink? Go ahead. Just don't drive. We know that you're going to drink. And I never did. They took it away from me. So, they did this weird mind trick. And then I was like, eh. But also, like we were talking about earlier, um, from a young age, like I didn't feel like I was in the right place ever. I like a loving family or like what a lot of people experience, even in broken families with divorces or like mixed families. At least they had a family. I had my mom, and my family was just it was odd because I was always the person that was there, but not really part of the crew. So being that person and then transitioning into that's a normal environment, I was already ahead of the game whenever it came to being aware, being situationally, present, being where my feet were, and then assessing the situation and doing what it is. But yeah, absolutely. I always looked at success because success leaves clues. And I started reading books early again because of my mom. And a lot of the things that I learned from then multimillionaires, now billionaires, is the decision cycle and like the focus has to be there. If you're focused on the wrong things will happen in your life. And a lot of people get focused on everything. And the world is so noisy right now that things like goals that used to work are no longer going to work. So I transitioned when the internet and social media started really grabbing people into this model of targets. Because when I was at the range looking at multiple targets and then pulling out my secondary and then my primary and then pulling out my secondary, I was using different tools to hit different targets, but I was at the same range. And I was like, this is just like life. If I focus on one target, I'm going to hit that target. And then if I use a different tool to hit the other target, I'm going to hit that target. And then if I use another tool to hit that target, I'm going to hit that target. If I use another tool, I just kept hitting targets and I was like, why is nobody talking about this? Everyone's still hooked on these goals. It's like New Year's resolutions. They don't work for a lot of people. But if you focus on just one thing, it's crazy. The book that translated that for me was The One Thing. It was published like 5 years ago now. Man, I usually have that book by me, but he talks about the math. And here's the math. The math is 33% of your day 5 years ago was spent switching between tasks. So if you're going to work and you're driving there, 33% of the time, you're probably listening to the radio, you're switching between tasks in the car, and then you get to work and then someone calls you and then someone walks in and then someone's sending you something on your message. And then you go out into the grocery store. It's just a whole bunch of switching between tasks. It's noisy. But if you close the door and you're in your space at home, then you can focus on whatever it is that you're going to focus on. So 33% of the time is switching between tasks is what he said. I pare that down to 25. And it looks like this. 4 hours out of your day, what are you doing? You're probably switching between tasks. That looks like, 1 week out of every month, you're switching between tasks. It looks like 2.5 years out of every 10 years, you're switching between tasks. And you start adding that up over a course of a lifetime, you got a lot of wasted time because you're following your goals instead of hitting your targets. So whenever you push your targets into alignment, you start hitting targets a lot faster because you focused on one thing. And if you focus on that one thing, the first thing, whatever it is that gets you the farthest, that's what you should focus on. And then whenever that's knocked out, you put your second target up, which is now your first target. and you focus on that, you'll find out that you can do 300 to 500% more in a day. And I learned that downrange. We would do a morning session, and then we would eat, and then we would have breakfast, and then we would eat, and we'd have lunch, and dinner. And every time in between those cycles, I was putting a day worth of work. So I was doing 3 to 5 days worth of work in one day. And I was getting massive experience talking to Navy SEALs, talking to long tabbers, the special forces guys, talking to Rangers, and talking, my Marine deputy was a phenomenal warrior. And I'd talk to him a lot because he had extensive knowledge in things that I just wasn't exposed to. So I was like, oh, this is awesome. I had a Ranger deputy that we spent hours talking about amazing operations that he had been on, and to refuel some of the things that we were doing today with some of the things that he had learned, getting a Purple Heart. So there's a lot of lessons that can be learned by those people that you put around you. And all of that equates to a target getting hit too. If you find somebody that helps you shoot, if you find somebody that steadies the target, you're going to find somebody that's going to help you on that team to knock down each one of the targets that you're setting up. So goals versus targets every day, targets for the win.
I love that. I love that. I want to transition to your time through SEER.
Okay.
And you mentioned it was all a mental game. It was all a mental game. And
Yeah.
I want to know, did you already have, that sounds like you already had you were very self-aware, it seems like, throughout childhood and going into the service. But so it seemed like you had a strong mindset. What came out to even become stronger to develop that mental toughness? And then are there things that you learned from there that you've used to get you through your career and even today in civilian life?
Yeah, definitely. So the last SEER class I think that we talked about was an advanced SEER class that I took before I went out to Afghanistan from Joint Special Operations Command. And that was the best course I took in the special operations community, I would say hands down, because it was specific to us and they gave us very specific details into what we might expect if we were captured or if we were whatever. But I'd been through SEERs in the past, I've been slapped in the face or whatever, been beat up, all the fun things that go along with SEER. But this one taught me a lot about taking it one step at a time. And you'll hear this a lot from SEALs, and they all have a story about how they got hurt, something got broken. I mean, because that's what you have to get through in order to have a mental mindset. The way people look at SEALs and they say that guy's tough, right? It's because they broke something, and the training's designed to break something whenever they go through buds. So they all have something they got broke, or they wouldn't have graduated because then they didn't pass the mental test. The SEER training that I went to did the same thing. It advanced the ball on how much I was willing to accept and think, oh, I'll be all right. So the thing that got me through the most difficult parts of the training was breathing, just focusing on my breathing. So they teach us in sniper school. They teach us in a lot of special operations. Navy SEALs do it too. It's called box breathing, right? Box breathing, you breathe in for 3 seconds, and then you hold it for 3 seconds. Then you breathe out for 3 seconds. Then you hold it for 3 seconds. And there's variations of this, right? If you're new to it, there's a 4-second rule. Breathe in for 4 seconds. If you're advanced, you can go down to 2. I changed it into what I call 3 breathing, and it's in my next book. But 3 breathing looks like this. When you get really good at box breathing, you can figure out where you're going to connect your mind and your body, and you become aware of when that happens. And until you do it a lot of times, you don't become aware, but you're also letting your body tell your mind what to do. And that creates laziness a lot of times, creates inaction. It creates a decisive cycle that doesn't work. So 3 breathing for me, I breathe in for 3 seconds and then I hold it until I make that feeling happen. My brain and my body connect. So I started doing that 3 breathing exercise, modified box breathing in SEER whenever things were getting really painful, or I was not comfortable, or I was watching things that I didn't want to watch, and I can't go into a lot of the specifics because it's a classified training still. But a lot of the things that they make you go through are designed to break you mentally, spiritually, and physically. So whenever you go through a training like that, it opens up the door to a lot of other things. And for me, I went from that training into a Goggins challenge where I was running 4 miles every 4 hours for 24 hours. And I did that with my other Air Force compadre that was with me in Joint Special Operations Command. And we kind of fed off of each other, and that was awesome. And people heard about it. All of the Special Forces guys were like, "Hey, we should do that," and they did. But I wanted it up. I wanted to keep up in it, right? Because everything that you pass, every gate that you go through, you're like, "All right, I did that. Now what? What's next?" And so I thought I'll do 48. So unlike a lot of people, unlike David Goggins' book, I actually consulted professionals. And I was like, "Hey, strength coach, what should I do? Hey, nutritionist, what should I do?" And I got this plan to do it. And I didn't train for it, but I got a plan from experts that said, "Hey, this is what you should do. You're not going to feel like eating. In 18 hours, you're not going to be hungry, but you need to eat. And this is what you should eat." So I had everything set up, and I did a 48-hour challenge alone. So I went from doing what you would call SEAL training with a partner, and having like a swim buddy,
Mhm.
to do these 4 hours and make sure that it was accountable, and like having a positive influence, to going into what Green Berets experience whenever they go through their training, being alone. And it's just like somebody's watching. I don't know who, but somebody's watching. And so there's a different mental shift, and everyone goes through it differently in the community. So Rangers do the same thing. They have this part where they lose all their sleep, they lose all their food, and then they have to do 3 or 4 days with a team, but they have to like kind of gel together to make it happen. So everyone does this type of thing. So I did a 24-hour, and then I did a 48. In the 48, my swim buddy was gone. So he's like, "Hey, I'm still going to hold you accountable. So text me." So this is where technology became very awesome, because I did 4. And he's like, "Good job." I said 8. He goes, "Man, you're going to do it." And, he started giving me this positive influence off a text where I was waiting for this positive influence. 2 o'clock in the morning, "Dude, I just completed 36. He's like, "Awesome." I was like, "My foot is broken." He's like, "You're going to keep going though." And I'm like, "I am. I'm going to keep going." So I texted him, and then, I was doing the stretches, and I was like, "Man, this is painful. My foot is broken. My toe is broken. My foot is bleeding. I had to run the last 20 miles barefoot because my shoes just wouldn't work, because, I didn't train for this. I did not train for this. So my shoes were like digging into my heel. They were digging into the side. So I had 4 cuts on my right side, and it was bleeding like a sieve. So I bandage it up, and I'd run 4 miles. And I'd take the bandage off, put a new bandage on. So I got a breather, which was awesome for me, but I completed it. And then after a while, I was like, did I send him a text? Because I was tracking the miles off of the text, and I think I lost one. So I ended up running an extra 4 miles just to make sure I made it. And
Mhm.
that last 4 miles was the easiest 4 miles I ever ran. Easiest by far, easiest 4 miles I ever ran, because I had broken through this mental cycle that a lot of people just wouldn't put themselves through. And I gained a lot of that. So the SEER training opened the gate to things like that, and then I continued. I did PRs on weights. I did PRs on running, and I hate running. So that tells you a lot.
Me too.
Yeah,
And
it's fun.
so, so two things you mentioned. A you mentioned you broke the like you broke that barrier of,
Yeah,
this is the hard to like just get it done, execute,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And
Execute.
you also mentioned uh SEALs with their swim buddies versus Green Berets, which is more individual.
Mhm.
What do you find is a bit more challenging?
It all depends on the situation. If you've got a sucky team, that's going to be challenging. And
Mm-hmm.
this is why. So SEALs are amazing. And I would say SEALs are at the top part of the special operations community because they work together as a team always. So if you're in the SEAL teams, you're part of a team that's proven themselves to be a part of a team, and you can work together. Um, Rangers are the same way. Rangers are a lot larger than the SEAL community, but they know each other's shadows. So they've been with each other a long time. So if you're in a Ranger regiment, you went through Ranger training, you're Ranger qualified. and then you were assigned to the regiment, and then you get your ribbon after you go to combat with them, then those people, small community, they know each other really well and they know how to work on their team. So I always gave everything that was really hard for me to like implement into the battlefield to the Rangers because I knew they would break it. They would be able to tell me, they would be honest with me. And that's a big thing, the honesty that comes with the team. And they would tell me from multiple perspectives. The Green Berets that I would work with, I would go out, do battlefield rotations. I would meet with one of them or one of them and their assistant, but it would be like no more than two people ever. And they were training indigenous forces. So they were trained to be like a one-man army to try to train other people. So they were still working with the team, but in a different way. So it all depends. Like if you have an indigenous force that sucks, I would hate to be that Green Beret. But and I'm not saying SEALs are cheaters, but SEALs know what they're getting. When they get another SEAL on the team, they know what they're getting. And that's why I think that's the best community in the special operations community. And I really love Rangers because there's a long pull with those guys too. So SEALs, Rangers, and Green Berets. I think Green Berets have it the hardest, honestly.
for for yourself with individual training versus having that buddy. It's like having that buddy, you're holding yourself accountable, you're doing it on your when you're on your own, there's
Yeah.
more room for cheating, really,
Yeah.
taking it easy and all that. For yourself, like when you're going into training, right? When you're writing your books, right? It's
Yeah.
you writing the book. It's like you're hitting a target, right? And you have to see that through. How what is there lessons that you've learned throughout your childhood or
Yeah.
time that allows you to be so driven and focused as an individual and shut down all the noise around you? It's so much easier for us to touch the phone or put on TV and do things that allow for avoidance instead of just sitting down and focusing.
Yeah. Making it happen. Yeah. All right. So Mel Robbins talks about counting to three. And three is the magic number. That's my rule of three. Goes back to the battlefields of Caesar. I mean, we can talk about the power of three all day long because I studied it in great detail. But the power of three, if you count one, two, three, Mel Robbins says if you do that in your head, and then you'll do it. You'll absolutely do it. I've used that multiple times, but I also connect it with my breathing so that I remind my body that my mind's in charge, not my body. So the body is the weakest part of the equation if your mind is mush. So your body's gonna be like, I'm hurt, and then people quit. And the mental toughness that goes into being in the special operations community at any facet. So that's logistics. That's like getting beans and bullets down to the guys downrange, right? That's getting people in to support the special operations community. Anyone that's in that community worked really hard to get there, and they had to go through this mental fortitude to pass the test to be a part of the community to help the people that have been through BUDS, that have been through Green Beret training, and all that other stuff. So just that breathing exercise that three, count to three, and then you'll see it, you'll feel it. Your brain connect to your body, and your brain reminds your body, hey, I'm in charge. You'll do whatever it is that's in front of you. And then one step at a time. A lot of people look at a problem and they see the end state and they go, wow, it's going to take so much work to do that. Books are the primary example. I talk to a lot of people who want to write a book. They're like, yeah, can you tell me how to do it? I'm like, yeah. All right, you got an hour? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, we'll touch on it. And then, I'll start walking through the steps. Like, all right, who's your audience? Who are you writing this for? Like, just writing a book for yourself is stupid. No one's going to read it. Who are you helping? And they're like, well, I wanted to do this for my kids. All right, so you're helping your kids. Okay. How are you outlining this so that they'll understand it? And then what are your main points that you want to convey to them? And then how are you going to illustrate that appropriately? And then who's going to format it? And then how big is the book going to be? Do you need to make it 2 books? And there's a whole lot of things that go into writing that people just don't think about. You know, and they just think it's easy. You just, get on your laptop and you write a Word document, you give it to somebody. That ain't how it works, man. There's a whole host of things to get it out there. And then you write the book. Then what? Who's reviewing it? Who's going to give you comments and who's going to give you feedback on it? Who's going to support it? Who's going to bring you into their podcast and talk about the things that you put in the book? There's a whole host of things that go in after it's published that no one talks about either. People don't think about that.
Mhm.
So I've been a bestseller for 5 months, the last 5 months. That isn't me sitting on my butt. This is me like talking to people about like the things my book can help them with. And they're like, oh, I'm going to buy that. You know, cool. This is me getting out into email list. No one talks about email lists as an author, but it's vital to get readers because they're all reading their emails. There's a whole, there's a plethora of things. People immediately, they look at the end state, then they look at the process and they go, I'm not doing that. I'm going to ring the bell. I'm going to leave the training early. I'm going to get hurt. That's another thing no one talks about. People get hurt just to leave the training. And then that gives them the excuse to tell other friends, well, I broke something. Everybody breaks something. All right. It's whether you're going to continue or not that determines the outcome of your life. So what? You're broken. Get over it.
I always say I'm really glad I don't know how hard things, like I am an executor. Like I have
Mhm.
a thing, I have this idea, I'm executing it, and
Yeah.
I'm always like, I'm so glad I don't. Some people are like research, but for me, I just know myself. And
Yeah.
I'm just like, no, I got to execute and just do it, because if I research and hear how hard it is in the process, I'm going to psych myself out.
Yeah.
And when I don't know and I just take those steps, I hit those targets, you're going to hit that objective. It's just seeing that, without the noise around you. And I think
Absolutely.
research is important at times, but then there's also times where it's like, just do it, just get it done. And
Oh,
I want
yeah.
to ask you, something. This is off tangent, but I just want to know, how was it living in the White House for 2 years?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely.
I
I get
just
that
want to
question a
know.
lot.
I'm
Yeah.
curious. Ugh.
All right. Yeah. So, I had my own space in the East Wing and I had a parking pass so I could drive up to the White House and park, which was awesome. And I was the Air Force guy that was on the team. So, um, for your listeners, there's a facet that has to be around the military elements that controls all of the military functions. And then that's the White House Military Office. They're in the East Wing of the White House. So it's the First Lady and the White House Military Office. And in there was my job and the President's Mill Aide. So those are the two military guys that were always there, have to be within a certain distance of the president at all times. That was fun because I'd pull up to the White House sometimes on my motorcycle and I would, park it and then get off, put my suit top on and walk in and I'd live there for 2 to 4 days, depending on what was going on. And then we would travel. We'd get on Marine One, we would get on Air Force One, and we would travel with the president and see things. Um, my biggest takeaway and my best stories, the one that put me on a national stage, is the realization that you don't have to be the president of the United States to make a huge impact. And it goes like this. Whenever I was living at the White House, I would wait for the president's schedule to come out for the next day because whenever they published the schedule, he was asleep. So whenever he was asleep, I could go to sleep, which was amazing. And then I would find out when he was going to work out in the morning because that's when he woke up. So then I could see how much sleep I was going to get. So the president's schedule would come out, and I'd always scan it, and I would look for this one thing as a meet and greet. And President Obama was big at meeting people. He loved meeting with people. He was just a phenomenal guy. I don't agree with all of his politics or all of the things that he did, but who does, right? No one agrees with everybody all the time. He just happened to be the president. But I worked for the president of the United States. It didn't matter who it was. It was the office of the president of the United States as a military person, and that's who I got. Was a historic president, which was cool to be there watching him be a person. And that's what I looked for in the calendar. I wanted to see him as a person. And he used to bring in like uh, Bono used to come in a lot and sing songs when we were on the road. They would like hang out. And I was like, oh, Bono, I'm not going to get any sleep because they'd be in there playing cards. And I just was like, oh, come on, man. Why does he have to come to my trips? But those type of things were fun. But whenever I'd see the calendar and I see a meet and greet, I get excited. And the biggest one that really transitioned me into a holistic like thinker of sorts and a positive influence was when we walked into a room and I saw this man in a wheelchair. And I didn't think of it as a meet and greet. I knew he was going to a meet and greet, but it was this guy in a wheelchair that he was meet and greet. And then President Obama walks in the door and he goes, "How you doing, young man?" with his big presidential voice. And this guy, this old guy in a wheelchair, his smile took over his face and replaced the wrinkles that were on his face. And his shoulders rocked back. And he became a young man when the president said those positive words to him. And I started thinking about him like, he says that. He says that. He says some other things. He says positive things when he walks into a room. Why am I not doing that? Why can't I do that? So I started doing it and immediately transitioned every room I walked into with a positive force. And shoulders rocked back and wrinkles were replaced with smiles. And people were glad to see me because I was a positive force in a negative world. And I brought that in the special operations community. And that's where I got my call sign. They saw me go through all a divorce, no one's paying for rental car or rental houses. I'm getting like my car's destroyed, all these things are happening in my personal life. And we're going through a civil war and President Trump's like, get out of Afghanistan. And like the national forces are looking at me because I had the NATO special forces commands. And they were like, "Hey, you had White House experience. What is the White House saying?" I'm like, "I'm not talking to the current administration." Like, I don't know, but I don't know. They've said this before. We're just going to go with it. So there's a whole host of things that happen with my White House experience, and that right there, that takeaway. You don't have to be the president of the United States to be positive and to uplift those around you. Come into every room with a positive note, with a smile, and a presence that's contagious, and it'll change your life.
I feel like you already answered my last question on like how we as civilians can improve our lives. And with what you just said, it doesn't just improve your life, it improves everyone around you. But if you got one more, give it to us. I want to hear.
All right, here you go.
Yeah.
All right. So the biggest thing that I've heard from multiple billionaires, and they don't really learn it until they're multi-million sessions, is the people around you are the most important thing, the most important thing. So the billionaires' success leaves clues. It's there. One of the things that they always say is, "I never knew X about somebody," because they never get a chance to like really dig into those that are directly around them because they're so busy. But when they become billionaires, they become very fluent in conversations about what are your passions? Who are you really? And most people don't ask themselves that question. They have to be asked that question. Gina, who are you? Can you answer that question?
Yeah, I could definitely answer that question.
because you've experienced this and you've gone through the cycle. A lot of people haven't. So if you haven't, you need to look in the mirror and ask yourself, who are you? What are you trying to do with this life? You only get one round at this life, and you got to keep fighting until you win. So what is it that you're trying to win? And a lot of people aren't asking themselves that question. And you know what is determining their outcomes? The people around them. So you look for people that you want to be like. You look for people that have targets that they're hitting. You look for people with success and positivity. The qualities that you want in your life, those are the people that should be around you. Your network is your net worth, right?
That's very true. Yeah. I love that. Wow. Yeah. That was amazing. I really like, you said a lot of great things actually throughout this whole entire interview. I'm so glad that Super Dave connected us and
I love Dave.
Yeah,
he's awesome.
Yeah, you're awesome. And I love your stories and everything. And I just want to thank you again for being on the podcast. I'm very grateful.
Gina. Yeah. Thanks for having me, Gina. Remember that the people in your life will determine who you are. Be careful who you let in your life because they will change it.
Thank you so much. And thank you, everyone that's listening. Please like, share, comment, subscribe, be a Patreon member so you get all the extra goodies that only our Patreons get. And thank you so much for listening.